با درود خدمت شما شنوندگان عزیز. با برنامه متفکرین برجسته مسیحی از سری برنامه‌های 5 حقیقت آشکار مهمون خونه های شما هستیم.
سلام، من ساسان توسلی هستم و امروز جلسه سوممون هست در مصاحبه با دکتر نورمن گایسلر، فیلسوف معروف و معاصر جامعه مسیحی در آمریکا. صحبت‌هایی که توی این جلسات گذشته داشتیم درباره رابطه عقل و ایمان، درباره حقیقت و امروز می‌خوایم وارد بحث وجود خدا بشیم. اگر حقیقت وجود داره، حقیقت رو ما میتونیم درک بکنیم. حقیقت بر ضد عقل و منطق نیست و حقیقت مطلقه و دلایل و شواهدی هست. خب صحبت اولی که مطرح میشه اینه که آیا اصلا خدا وجود داره و ما چطوری میتونیم بدونیم که خدا وجود داره؟ آیا شاید این حرفا خرافات هاست، عقاید گذشتگانه و ما امروز دیگه برایش هیچ دلیل و منطقی نداریم درباره وجود خدا؟ پس امروز میخوایم بحثمون رو درباره وجود خدا و درباره اون باشه و روی این مسئله تاکید بکنیم. Thanks again Dr. Geisler for being with us today. We are going to focus our conversation today on the existence of God. How do we know God exists? How do we know these are not just superstitions of the past? Things that our fathers have told us, but today we really have no longer any reason to believe in God's existence. You talked about the truth in the previous session. How do we know that God exists?
Well, we know God exists because either one of two things is true. Either man created God or God created man. So you got two basic positions. And Karl Marx, founder of Marxism, said he believed that man created God. We believe that God created man and that God created the world. And the reason we know this is because truth is what corresponds to the facts. And it's a fact that this world had a beginning. Everything that has a beginning had a beginner. The world had a beginning, therefore the world had a beginner. Everything that comes to be has a cause. The world came to be, therefore the world had a cause. This is called the cosmological argument for God. And it's mentioned in many sources. We have Judaism and Islam and Christian sources, all of which give evidence that God exists from this cosmological argument. Modern science has demonstrated this. We have an agnostic astronomer named Robert Jastrow. And Robert Jastrow wrote a book titled God and the Astronomers, in which he says that all of the evidence points to this universe coming into existence out of nothing some billions of years ago in a gigantic explosion called the Big Bang. Here's the evidence. Number one, the second law of thermodynamics, which says the amount of usable energy in the universe is decreasing. In a closed, isolated system, like the universe is, the amount of usable energy is decreasing. You put gas in your car and the gasoline goes down. Why? Because the energy is being used up and is being transformed into heat. The universe is like that. So if the universe is running down, it's like one of these little hourglasses, has the sand in the top and it runs down to the bottom. You know, it takes 2 minutes. If it's only half empty, you know it hasn't been there forever. The universe has not completely run down, so it hasn't been here forever. That's a very powerful argument for the beginning of the universe. Secondly, scientists have discovered that the universe is expanding. I met the gentleman who used to be an atheist, by the way, who became a believer in God. His name was Alan Sandage, and he did the study on 42 galaxies ranging out into space on the Mount Palomar telescope in California. And he discovered that the universe is getting larger and larger. It's like a balloon with dots on it, and the balloon is getting bigger and bigger. So the dots are getting farther apart. Now, if you put that motion picture of the universe in reverse, the universe would get smaller and smaller, and it would contract into nothing. That's the point of beginning. They've also discovered the radiation echo, that when the universe exploded into being, they discovered a radiation echo, the microwave radiation, that's the exact wavelength of a gigantic explosion. Then they predicted that if that's true, there should be a big mass of energy out there. And they sent the Hubble telescope up, and the Hubble telescope discovered this big mass of energy that was predicted from the original explosion of the universe. Then Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity predicted that the universe had a beginning also. So there are 5 lines of scientific evidence that said that this universe is not eternal. But everything that has a beginning has a beginner. So there's one very powerful argument for God's existence.
Couldn't matter be eternal?
Matter cannot be eternal because matter is what we refer to as the cosmos. The whole cosmos is made up of matter, and that matter is running out of usable energy. Therefore, matter cannot be eternal.
من از دکتر گایسر پرسیدم که آیا ماده نمیتونست ابدی باشه و دکتر گایسر گفت نه به این دلیل. سوالی دیگه میخوام بکنم، آیا دلایل دیگه وجود داره برای اثبات وجود خدا؟ Are there other reasons you can give as a Christian philosopher for the existence of God?
There are 3 main reasons that Christians give for believing in God. One is that there must be a creator of the cosmos, a cause, a first cause of all things. The second argument is that every design has a designer. The universe shows design. Therefore, it must have had a designer. We're told that from the very moment of this Big Bang explosion of the universe, from that very moment, the whole universe was fine-tuned and tweaked in such a way that life would emerge. If it had not been so fine-tuned, life would not have emerged. If we didn't have as many planets as we do, as the distance weren't the same, if they didn't have moons on the planets, if the sun were closer to the earth, if we didn't have a moon for the earth, for the tides, life would not have been possible from the very beginning unless the whole universe was fine-tuned or tweaked for the emergence of life. This is called the anthropic principle, anthropos, the Greek word for man, that from the beginning of the universe, man was in mind, that some advanced planner planned that the universe would make life for human beings possible in this world. There's another line of evidence that microbiologists have discovered. It's called irreducible complexity. It's like a mouse trap. It has to have so many parts. They have to all be there at the same time in order for the mouse trap to work. The human eye. You have to have a cornea, you have to have a retina, you have to have a pupil, you have to have all of these parts there. If you don't have one part, say you have 90% of an eye, you have zero vision. Because you got all of them there at the same time to see. Even Charles Darwin, the famous agnostic evolutionist, said that he shuddered when he thought of the human eye because he couldn't explain the human eye. Human eye can't be explained because it's designed, and without a designer, you don't have a design. Another thing they've discovered is what's called specified complexity, that the DNA, the little code of life that living cells have that spells out exactly what they should do and how they should develop, that this DNA in a one-cell animal, suppose the evolutionists were right that in the primordial ocean, this one little cell emerged. Well, one little cell doesn't emerge in a primordial ocean because it takes a designer. A one-cell animal, an amoeba, has 1,000 volumes of the encyclopedia full of information inside of that one little cell. And that's like believing that 1,000 volumes of the encyclopedia resulted from an explosion in a printing shop, or that a Boeing 747 airplane resulted from a tornado raging through a junkyard. Never happens. Because it takes an intelligent being. The laws of nature destroy, they randomize, but they don't specify and spell out information. Suppose you looked up in the sky and there was a message that said, drink Coca-Cola. Well, immediately you know there must be some intelligent being. You don't say, oh, interesting cloud formation, or I wonder if the wind is blowing from another direction. It takes an intelligent person. Now, if drink Coca-Cola takes an intelligent person, how about 1,000 volumes of the encyclopedia? Takes an intelligent person to put all those letters together. So the cosmological argument says there must be a beginner because there's a beginning. The teleological argument, the argument from design, says every design has a designer. The universe shows design. Life shows design. Those are two of the arguments used to show that there must be a God.
Many philosophers have raised objections against the traditional proofs for God's existence. Even in Iran, books by Immanuel Kant or David Hume are being translated and published. And what can you say as a Christian philosopher to the objections of people like Kant and Hume and others? I'll ask maybe another question later on this issue. ازتون میخواستم بپرسم که خیلی از فیلسوف‌های معتبر مثل امانوئل کانت، مثل دیوید هیوم خیلی مسائل رو مطرح کردن بر ضد این نوع دلایل درباره وجود خدا و خیلی الان عقیده دارن که دیگه خدا رو نمیشه ثابت کرد، وجودش یه چیز ایمانی منطقی نیست به خاطر بحث‌های افرادی مثل کانت و هیوم. شما به عنوان یه فیلسوف مسیحی چه جوابی دارید که به اونها بگید؟
I have studied Immanuel Kant and David Hume for many years. I've written many books expounding and evaluating their views, and I think that they are wrong for the following reasons. David Hume said that no one in their right mind would believe that this universe has an eternal number of moments before today, because you can't have an infinite number of moments before today. An infinite has no end, and today is the end of all moments before today. So if you can't have an infinite number of moments before today, there had to be a beginning. And if there's a beginning, there had to be a beginner. In fact, David Hume himself said in a letter to Stuart, in I think volume 1 of his letters, in letter 187, where he said, no one would believe that nothing produced something. Everything had a cause. Everything that comes to be has a cause, and it's absurd, he said, to deny this principle. Well, if everything that comes to be must have a cause, and the universe can't be eternal, then by two premises from David Hume, you can prove that God must exist. Furthermore, his basic premise of skepticism was wrong. It was self-defeating. He said, be skeptical about everything. Well, should I be skeptical about skepticism? If I'm skeptical about skepticism, then I'm back to knowing something for sure. If he really wanted us to suspend judgment on everything, then why don't we suspend judgment on his view? So his view is self-defeating. Immanuel Kant, same thing. He wrote a book, Critique of Pure Reason, in which he said, you can't know the real world. You can't know the realm of God up there, out there, which he called the noumenal world. You can only know the thing to you, the world of appearance, the way things appear to you. But the problem with that is, how did he know that you couldn't know the real world? If you say, I know that you can't know truth, then you know a truth. There's the truth that you know that you can't know truth. But if he can know truth, if he's making statements about the real world, and he is, he's making statements about, I can't know that there's a God out there. We can't prove that there's a God out there. So he's making statements that aren't just appearing to him, statements about the real world, saying you can't make statements about the real world. So his view is self-defeating. Hume's view is self-defeating. We've gone through all of their arguments. He offered some so-called contradictions. If everything has a cause, then there must be a first cause. But if everything has a cause, then there can't be a first cause, but it must have a cause.
So somebody must also make God.
Yeah. Somebody
یکی هم باید پس خدا رو درست کنه. اگه خدا همه چیز رو درست کرده.
Who made God? And the answer is, nobody made God. He's the unmade maker. He's the uncaused cause. something has to be eternal. If the universe isn't eternal, then there must be some God out there who is eternal, who made the universe. If the universe is eternal, you don't need a God. But the universe is not eternal. We got 5 lines of evidence that it had a beginning. If the universe had a beginning, it didn't last forever. If it wasn't there forever, then the one who caused the universe had to be there forever. Why? Because you can't go on having an infinite regress of causes forever. There has to be something that actually started the whole process going. Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, said there can't be an infinite regress of causes because something has to start the causality in the series. If everything is being caused, then nothing is causing. But if it's being caused, something must be causing. Therefore, that something cannot be caused because it's the one that's doing the causing of everything else.
How about people like Marx or Nietzsche? Their works are being translated into Farsi and Iranians are reading them, that say that God is a projection of human mind, as you said in the beginning. Man made God. What would you say to that? چیزی که خیلی افرادی مثل مارکس یا نیچه میگن که نه، ما افکارمون رو پروژکت کردیم به بالا و خدا رو ساختیم و خدا افکار ما بوده که ما اون رو آسمونش بردیم و خدا وجود واقعی و بیرونی نداره.
Well, there are 2 things to say. First of all, we know man didn't make God because a man is not eternal and the world is not eternal, and there is a God who made the world. So we know that as a matter of fact, that's not true. Secondly, their view is self-defeating. They're saying that God is nothing but a projection of my thoughts. Well, how would you know he's nothing but a projection of your thoughts unless you knew more than your thoughts? You can't make nothing but statements unless you have more than knowledge. So you'd have to know more than nothing but in order to say God is nothing but my own imagination. You'd have to know more than your imagination to make that statement that he's nothing but your imagination. So their view is self-defeating and therefore wrong. Their view is contrary to the facts because the universe and man are not eternal.
Can you give us some other reasons or lines of evidence that lead to the belief that God exists? آیا دلیل دیگه‌ای هم هست که درباره وجود خدا میتونیم مطرح بکنیم؟
There's a third argument, and it's called the moral argument. It was developed by a former atheist, C.S. Lewis, a British atheist who decided that he would start thinking about these things, and he came to the conclusion that everybody believes something's right and something's wrong. There's a moral law. Every moral law has a moral law giver. Every prescription has a prescriber. Every legislation has a legislator. Now, if every law has a lawgiver, and there is an objective moral law that says this is right and that's wrong, that love is right and hatred is wrong, that kindness is right and cruelty is wrong, even if there's only one moral law, say we should be tolerant or we should be open-minded, even if there's one moral law in the universe, there must be a moral lawgiver. And this moral lawgiver is beyond the universe. And the fact that we make statements like, the universe is, the world is getting worse. Well, how do we know that? You can't know something's getting better unless you know what's best. You can't say something's getting worse unless you have an objective standard to measure that by. You can't make statements like, one person is a better person than another person, say some great noble person who has done wonderful things for mankind, as opposed to some vicious criminal type person. How do we know one is better than the other if we don't know what's best? But we do make statements like that, and we do know that certain things are getting worse, and we do know when certain things are getting better, but you can't say this is an imperfect circle unless you know what a perfect circle is. You can't say that's a crooked line unless you know what a straight line is. And C.S. Lewis said, I discovered that my atheism was arguing in a circle because I was saying that this world is unjust. Well, how do I know it was not just unless I know what's just? If I didn't know what's just, I couldn't make pronouncements about this world being evil, and everybody knows there's evil in the world, but if there's any evil in the world, then there must be an absolute moral standard. If there's an absolute moral law, there must be an absolute moral lawgiver. Now, put those three together. We know there must be a powerful cause of the universe who brought it into being. We know he must be intelligent, and we know he must be absolutely good. Those three things together comprise what we call the theistic or monotheistic view of God that's held by Judaism, Islam, and Christianity.
Now, if there are so many compelling lines of evidence that take us to the existence of God, why are there so many brilliant people in the history of human thought that have rejected that belief? People like Bertrand Russell and Jean-Paul Sartre, or Marx or Nietzsche and others that we talked about. Why are there so many brilliant people going around the world in your circles of philosophy and saying, no, God doesn't exist, or we can't know that God exists? سوالی که میخوام بکنم اینه که اگر وجود خدا اینقدر دلایل و شواهد هست برای وجود خدا، چرا اینقدر افراد متفکر بزرگ در تاریخ مثل فیلسوفای خیلی زیاد در طول تاریخ، افرادی مثل برتراند راسل، ژان پل سارتر و نیچه، مارکس و خیلی دیگه اصلا وجود خدا رو انکار کردن؟ پس چرا اونها این واقعیت و حقیقت رو نمیبینن؟
Because it's not simply a matter of the mind, it's also a matter of the will. You can lead the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. You can show a person the elevator with the light on, somebody getting off, but you can't make him get on the elevator. You can say, well, now there would be a nice person that you should marry, but you can't force them to do it because they have to make a choice. And so with God, God has left open this matter of free choice. He's created us with free will, and he's given us a choice to make. We don't have to believe in him. We don't have to accept him. We don't have to do anything. We're free creatures. We can say no to it. And when you study the lives of the great atheists, they admitted either explicitly or implicitly that the matter of belief in God was a matter of their choice. Nietzsche, for example, said, if you tell me I must believe God, hubris, pride comes over me. Well, what does that mean? Well, don't tell me I have to believe God because a little man on the inside stands up and says, I don't want to believe. Was that a matter of his mind or his will? He said in his book, The Antichrist, if you could prove this God of the Christians to me, I would believe him all the less. And I scratch my head and say, now wait a minute, a rational person, if you could prove it, he would believe it all the more, right? Well, it wasn't the rational matter with him. You could present all the proof you want, but he still wasn't going to believe. It's a matter of the will. Jean-Paul Sartre, famous French existential atheist, in his autobiography titled Words, that's the whole title of the book, he tells about how he became an atheist. When he was a young lad, he was burning a hole in a rug. And God convicted him of his sin. And he said, anyone so unkind as to intrude into a child's play isn't worthy to be believed in. So I gave up believing in God. He said, I got rid of God the Father, but I couldn't get rid of the Holy Spirit. He attached himself on the back of my neck. Now, this is almost a word-for-word quote. He said, I caught the Holy Spirit in the cellar one day, and I threw him out. And he's never bothered me from that day to this. Atheism is a cruel and long-range affair. I've carried it through consistently. I've lost my illusions. Now, I commend to you that his problem was not intellectual, it was volitional. It wasn't a matter of the mind, it was a matter of the will. That's exactly what St. Paul said in Romans 1:18. They know the truth, but they're suppressing it. They're holding it down in unrighteousness. They know that the evidence is there, but they refuse to believe in. They know that, but they don't want to believe in. They've got intellectual assent that says there's the evidence there, but they do not have volitional consent in order to make the decision.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Geiser, for your time with us today. بینندگان عزیز، امیدوارم خیلی ممنونم اولا که با ما بودید در این چند دقیقه‌ای که با هم صحبت می‌کردیم. امیدوارم که صحبت‌های دکتر گایسر براتون مفید بوده باشه. تا جلسه آینده، خدا نگهدار.
شنوندگان عزیز، از اینکه تا این لحظه با برنامه متفکرین برجسته مسیحی با ما همراه بودین سپاسگزاریم. شما میتونید نظرات و پیشنهاداتتون رو از طریق شماره واتساپ 2031 638 98 98 98 و یا از طریق آدرس info@persianworldradio.com و همچنین وبسایت persianworldradio.com برامون ارسال کنید.
تو را خواهم خواندی مرا دوستت، بیا به خواب من ای جان شیرینم. حضورت را خواهم، عشقت را می جویم، لمس کن مرا شاهم، نیاز به تو دارم. زخما به دل دارم، دستم بگیر یارم، ترسم لغزت پایم وقتی که تنهایم. عیسی بمان با من، شادان شود روحم، شکست دهم شیطان با نام قدوست. همواره همچون ایوب و یوسف از بوته آزمایش، از طوفان‌های زمان آیم سویت سرفراز، آیم سویت سرفراز. تو را خواهم، خواندی مرا دوستت، بیا به خواب من ای جان شیرینم. حضورت را خواهم، عشقت را می جویم، لمس کن مرا شاهم، نیاز به تو دارم. زخما به دل دارم، دستم بگیر یارم، ترسم لغزت پایم وقتی که تنهایم. عیسی بمان با من، شادان شود روحم، شکست دهم شیطان با نام قدوست. همواره همچون ایوب و یوسف از بوته آزمایش از طوفان‌های زمان آیم سویت سرفراز آیم سویت سرفراز